Good afternoon, everybody. We wanted to take this opportunity just a day before I introduce to the legislature for their consideration the May revise, a revision of our January budget proposal, to update people on the efforts that are underway on emergency preparedness and emergency planning here in the state of California. And that's why we're here in El Dorado County, not far from our Office of Emergency Services, where so much of the work and preparation is being done for the next fire season. And I want to remind everybody that we are entering a fire season. We just got out of a fire season in this state. Some have argued there are no longer fire seasons in the state of California, that it is a year-round challenge for all of us. But I want folks to know we are mindful of the threats. We are mindful of the understandable anxiety that this time of year presents to people, in addition to what's going on with COVID-19. And I want folks to know that we have been preparing for this upcoming wildfire season. And we're not stepping back our efforts. We're in fact stepping them up. The budget I will announce tomorrow will include enhancements for wildfire preparation and preparedness across the board, as well as suppression strategies and opportunities to be more resilient in our recovery strategies. In a moment, I'll lay out some very specific examples of budgetary enhancements, but let me just lay down a predicate. Just this last week, 246 wildfires have occurred here in the state of California. We just ran some numbers from January to May 10th last year. We had 675 wildfires. From January to May 10th this year, we've had 1,135 wildfires. Represents roughly a 60% increase this year compared to last year in the total number of wildfires. Doesn't surprise our team here, doesn't surprise many of the experts. We have had a below average year of precipitation, the snowpack substantially below where it's been, or at least was last year. And so as a consequence, this has only reinforced our desire to do more and to be better in terms of our preparation. We had announced last year that we were focusing on 200 vulnerable communities in the state of California, and really focused our efforts on 35 high-profile vegetation and fuel management projects. 34 of those 35 have been complete. The one that's been delayed a little bit will be done in just 8 days, and that's around Highway 17 in the sort of south of Santa Clara County, more towards Santa Cruz. That project has been a stubborn project, but finally will be complete, as I said, just in a matter of days. We continue to do more than we've done in the past on defensible spaces, and Chief Porter will come up. He'll talk perhaps a little bit more about some of those efforts. Our fuels management and vegetation management are not just focused on those 35 high-profile projects. They exist and persist all throughout the state of California. They're complemented by private sector work in that space, by local work in that space, and by the state's efforts themselves. Some 450,000 acres in 2020 will be advanced in terms of the fuels management, in terms of the vegetation management, in some cases some prescribed burns, and others some reforestation. In that portfolio, we're getting more work done than we have in the past. It's still not where we need to go as a state. The size and scope of the state, we still have a lot more work to do in the future on vegetation and forest management, and there is no substitute for the work the federal government can be providing and advancing in this space as well. And we encourage, as always, our federal partners to help us with these efforts, because the overwhelming majority of land that exists in this state, wildland, is federal land. A very small percentage is state land, and again, private and local land. And so we continue to advance and look forward to securing even more support in that space. In an effort as well to secure support, we recognize that this season, fire season, always is anxiety-inducing for an additional reason, and that's the issues of PSPS. Those are 4 letters that most Californians, at least in Northern California in particular, are familiar with, but those in Southern California as well. These are the power shutoff that we experienced in record numbers last year. In an effort to do more and do better, as you may recall, a few months ago, the top story that focused our attention and focused our efforts in the legislature and in my office was working to help get PG&E back on its feet and out of bankruptcy, and to help the 3 other investor-owned utilities, or 2 others, 3 total in the state investor-owned utilities, to be more secure, not only financially, but more secure in their capacity to invest in your future and our collective future. And what I mean by that is to make the investments themselves, independent of the state, federal, local, and private sector, to invest in their own efforts to secure their wires, their poles, to advance their undergrounding, to focus on secularizers and making sure that they have greater capacity in real time to have information with infrared cameras and weather stations, their efforts to do more on their own vegetation management, to secure their own aerial fleet, to provide more air support for recovery efforts, to do more on your behalf to secure wildfire safety and public safety. I want to update you just in those efforts. You may recall there was an effort that the legislature and our team advanced that required certain things from our investor-owned utilities. I want to update you on what those are and remind you how important they are to our larger wildfire efforts. $5 billion is required of our investor-owned utilities in safety measures. That's a requirement pursuant to the agreement we advanced that must come from the IOUs directly, independent, again, of all of these state efforts. We created a wildfire advisory committee to focus on public safety. That is also a requirement under that bill and these efforts. We are announcing tomorrow in our budget, the Public Utilities Commission is building a team of 106 individuals that will create a wildfire safety division within the Public Utilities Commission. That division will become an independent entity, but right now it will start within the Public Utilities Commission. That division will 24/7 oversee the efforts of all 3 of our largest investor-owned utilities. We have a monitor now that we have put in place, for example, at PG&E, to independently monitor their safety efforts. We have safety mitigation plans, what we call wildfire mitigation plans, that are a requirement to be certified by the boards of these utilities and then ultimately by the Public Utility Commission with an advisory committee that will advise the Commission. It's a way of saying we are in a place we've never been in the past in terms of oversight and accountability and transparency with our investor-owned utilities to help support these wildfire mitigation efforts. I am not naive that these utilities are where they need to be. Quite the contrary. In fact, PG&E is still in bankruptcy. They have the opportunity to come out of bankruptcy by June 30th, but a predicate of all of that are fulfilling the requirements of these plans. But we will do our part, and that is to make sure that there's real transparency and accountability to these utilities, and to make sure that they do justice to what they're promising and what has been promoted in terms of these requirements. So that's just a quick update on where the IOUs are. And by the way, I just do want to recognize that PG&E has significantly increased their number of weather stations, significantly increased their high-definition cameras, and has committed to new protocols on the PSPS, where they have committed to us a duration reduction of roughly 50% in terms of their time to provide what we refer to as an all clear and then turning on your lights. We'll hold them to account in that respect. I don't hold my breath in any of these categories. We've been sobered by the reality of PG&E in particular over the last number of years. But we are emerging in a different frame, in a different space, and a different framework of engagement now and oversight that I hope can allow people to rest, well, maybe not with both eyes closed, but one eye open, but rest assured that we are taking these efforts very, very seriously and holding this company to account in ways they haven't been in the past. So from the IOUs to the work that the Public Utilities Commission will be doing, to a budget that will increase at the Office of Emergency Services over the existing baseline budget approved last year by $127 million. We will be improving the budget at the Office of Emergency Service to provide for ongoing monitoring, not just of oversight related to wildfires, but also all other hazards. We talk in terms of all hazards. That includes earthquakes. And I'm, again, maybe just being born and bred, 5-generation Bay Area resident, San Francisco resident. Earthquakes continue to be top of my mind. There's $17.3 million in this budget for our early warning system, for our earthquake system. We're going to transfer our Seismic Safety Committee into the Office of Emergency Services for stronger integration, $2.2 million of budget enhancement that I'm recommending for the legislature's consideration. We'll announce tomorrow. In addition to that, we are looking to do more in terms of our disaster assistance, some $38.2 million of enhancements in that effort. I referenced PSPS. We're going to put $50 million in the budget to help support grants for local counties to help in their efforts around PSPS. And by the way, that matters this year in particular because there's some concern around PSPS turning off the lights during the election. And so we want to secure the election as well. And so those dollars are for that consideration in addition to other considerations as it relates to backup generators and more broad planning. Speaking of planning and preparedness, there's an additional $9.2 million for baseline support for a number of individuals that we believe are important to enhance the Office of Emergency Service in this category as well. Speaking of categories, I have neglected one, and it's important as I segue and introduce Chief Porter, and that's CAL FIRE in particular. Separate from the $127 million enhancement, the Office of Emergency Service above the current baseline that we're proposing to the legislature, we are also proposing $85.7 million enhancement to CAL FIRE, specifically to improve surge capacity and to hire critical personnel before the peak of this year's fire season. Roughly 600 additional personnel, we believe, are needed to protect people from wildfires to the extent we can protect you and help mitigate the ferocity of these wildfires. So this is a significant enhancement in terms of the overall ranks at CAL FIRE, and we're just going to hold the line on that. We're going to work with the legislature, and I hope together we can together hold the line in terms of the importance of these personnel. So that's an enhancement in that space. I can mention a number of others from work we're doing with Technosilva in terms of predictive modeling, which is important, new tools, new technology that we'll bring to bear, which will also help with our wildfire efforts. But foundationally, people. There's no substitute for people. And those people, by the way, will also be supported by these engines. We're able to get, by July of this year, we will have an additional 26 new engines all throughout the state of California, including 4 incident command units that will also be deployed by July 1st. We're going to have other equipment, even outside of just these engines, and they include new Black Hawk helicopters. You may recall we promoted the procurement of 12 Black Hawk helicopters. We're not going to walk that back. It's just too important in terms of our mutual aid and public safety in the state of California. I want folks to know those helicopters are now arriving. First one came in in October of last year. In fact, it was just used in that red fire up in Tehama County. These Blackhawks are extraordinary. They provide faster suppression capacity, a more robust ability in terms of number of gallons of water that they're able to disperse. They're safer for our personnel in terms of redundancy, double twin turbine engine. I can go on and on with the specs of these. I think they're S701 Blackhawks, but 12 of them are coming in. The first one came in October. Another one's coming in this month. Another one after that next month. We'll start to see these Blackhawks in our fleet, and I just think that's fundamental and foundational to our suppression efforts and our ability, again, to meet the public safety needs in this state. We can talk another time about the C-130s. All those things are baseline. We're continuing to bring into this new year. So look, let me now bring in, I think I've said enough on this topic, at least for the moment. Let me bring in the chief of CAL FIRE. He could talk more specifically about this budget. I think a little bit of relief as well with some of these recommendations. But you'll be seeing plenty, I think, sadly, of Tom Porter over the coming weeks and months, as is the case every fire season in this state. The hots are getting hotter, the dries are getting drier, the wets are getting wetter. There's a new reality. For those that don't believe in climate change or science, I remind them when appropriate, after our stay-at-home orders are lifted, when you can come in without fear of transmission of this deadly virus, come to California, visit us, learn about climate change firsthand, because even if you deny it, your own eyes may tell you something very, very differently. Observed evidence, not just intellectual curiosity, should secure a new reality that climate change is real and it's here and the effects are profound. And that's why we want to acknowledge that as well up front. And that's a good part of the work that our chief has to deal with as it relates to the acuity of the fight he has in front of us each and every fire season. Chief Porter.
Thank you, Governor. I'm going to cover three things. Response, prevention, and preparedness. Very simply, those three things, every one of them is being invested in by this state government. Thank you, Governor, for recognizing that these are things that are not going away. They are very important to protecting lives, property, and the environment of California for future generations, and they have to be invested in now, and continuing that investment is key to our success. So, response. Response is to wildland fire in particular, but all large emergencies, is a team sport. No one agency in California can do that mission alone. CAL FIRE is responsible for wildland fires off of federal lands, sometimes on federal lands as well, throughout the state. And so we lead that charge. We have a very strong wildland fire ethic, wildland fire training, wildland fire response. We also have, as in the case of where we stand today, a mutual aid response, that is CAL FIRE employees. But we also need our local government partners. We need our cities, we need our counties, we need our districts, we need our volunteers. We need them all healthy and ready to go to these wildfires as well. As I said, team sport, we need everybody. That includes our federal partners. Wildland fire fighters from the U.S. Forest Service, BLM, BIA, and other agencies, Fish and Wildlife Service. We need everybody ready to go. What I'm happy to say is that we've been working since January very closely with all of these groups to ensure that we're looking out for the safety and health of the firefighters, but also for the health and safety of the community that we will be coming to protect, not knowing where that's going to be across the state of California. So very coordinated. more than any other time in the level of coordination that's happening. And that is because of the pandemic that we're working through. So prevention. Prevention is a key component to keeping fires small, to keeping fires out of the areas that are most populated, where we're going to have the most concern about lives and property loss, but it's also important for our backcountry fires as well. The reason I bring up prevention is I had a conversation with the chief of the Forest Service, Vicki Christensen, just yesterday. Asked her the question about what do you see as the need for being proactive this year and putting all of the fires out as quickly as we possibly can. She was very complimentary to my question and expressed and pointed back to her chief's letter to the nation of firefighters under her that says just that. Initial attack is the key component to keeping fires small and keeping firefighters healthy. I am going to continue to push that with my federal partners. Everybody's on board. As I said, we've been talking about this. This is a very key component. But if we keep fires small at the beginning with these extra resources that we're going to have, then we will protect the public and our firefighters from unnecessary exposure to smoke and the need to bring them together in congregational settings. All key components. Prevention has a piece that is all-inclusive, those agencies that I talked about, but it also includes you, the public. And that brings me from the bridge from prevention to preparedness. You, every single one of you in California, have a part in this. You can protect lives and property. You can reach out to your neighbors, reach out to the elderly, reach out to family members. You can help them do the defensible space around their homes that needs to be done and should be done at this time of year. We are doing our defensible space inspections, and so you'll see our people around. Local government is doing that as well, and some of the counties. We need to make sure that you have defensible space, and you can help your neighbors, neighbors helping neighbors, to be prepared for this fire season. There's so many other things you can do as well, including the hardening of your structure. Hardening of your structure is something that you can do. Again, you can help your neighbor do, and that will make it more resistant to burning down in the event of a fire coming into your neighborhood. There are some very simple things that you can do. It's easy. Just go to readyforwildfire.org, check out the website. It has checklists. You can see how you're doing. Very important information there. There's also an app that you can get on any mobile device that will take you through the exact same thing. It'll give you a shopping list that you can take down to Home Depot or Lowe's or your favorite store and get the supplies that you'll need to do that. So if you will continue to work on that piece, you will be a hero in the wildland fire setting in California. And every single Californian can be that hero. We will work on the wildland fire problems in the backcountry and in the canyons and wildland spaces. Continue to do the fuel work that the governor mentioned, and that is what we will do and commit to, and we will respond to every single wildland fire that occurs in the state this year, and there will be tens of thousands. Thank you, and I look forward to the governor's comments on the rest.
Thank you. Obviously, Chief Porter will be available for any questions. Look, I know this is rote. It's a tired cliche, but you got to walk and chew gum at the same time. We're focused on C-19. We're focused on coronavirus, mitigation, trying to do our best to suppress the spread at the same time. We've got to mitigate and suppress these fires as we move into wildfire season. This is top priority of this state, the legislature, and our administration, and I want folks to know that we are not going to step back despite the economic headwinds of our responsibility to meet this moment as well as we try to meet so many other moments in the midst of this crisis. I want to also just thank, because he's here, Mark Gilladucci and his team at the Office of Emergency Services for his advice and counsel through this budget process and the good work his team is doing to prepare for wildfire season. The mutual aid system is second to none. That mutual aid exists within the state and exists outside of the state of California. And all I can say before I update you on the daily numbers is the Western pact we have with Western state governors related to the COVID-19 response is a perfect bridge from that response to bridging into our collective response and responsibility as Americans to one another to help support their wildfire efforts as well. And so it's just another one of many examples of what a pandemic can do in terms of bringing people together, forcing conversations anew, and developing partnerships in a collaborative spirit that will transcend that crisis and benefit us as we move into other challenging moments in our state and our nation. With that, let me just move in to the daily update and briefing in terms of the total number of people that have been tested positive over the last 24 hours for COVID-19, total number of lives lost. Update you on some trends as it relates to ICU numbers and hospitalization numbers, and also want to update you on the number of counties, including this county, that have self-attested, self-certified that they have a containment plan and are being advanced into a deeper part of our phase 2. So let me try to break that down in order. We had 1,759 additional people tested positive yesterday for COVID-19. We were able to test over 32,222 individuals in the last 24 hours. Now we have tested over 1,065,000 people in this state since we began our testing process. Tragically, we lost 87 lives in the last 24 hours, 87 families torn apart because of a tragic death and loss of a loved one. It is a sobering reminder that people are still dying from this virus. People are still transmitting this virus. People must continue to take this seriously. This virus has not disappeared. It has not gone away. And as we enter into fire season, we have to also be cognizant that as we increase our ranks and personnel, that we keep our first responders healthy as a top priority so that they can keep us safe as we move forward. For no other reason, for those out there that feel like they're immune to the transferability of this virus, I hope you'll consider the first responders of your communities, the heroes of our communities, and consider their safety, their health as well, because we are not out of the woods as it relates to COVID-19 in this state. We had some good news with our ICU numbers yesterday, down modestly, 0.3%. You've been noticing a little bit of a trend with ICU rates over the course of the last number of weeks, some stability, and now seeing some modest decreases most every day. Hospitalization numbers stable without the modest decreases, 0.5% increase in the total number of those hospitalized in this state over the 24-hour reporting period. So well within 1%. Again, stabilization over the course of many, many weeks now. This is a very different state than other states where you had huge peaks and decreases. We've had stability for many, many weeks, and we're seeing modest decreases in ICUs, a little bit of a decrease trend line in hospitalizations. Death numbers continue to vex. Yesterday was more modest. Today, 87 lives tragically lost. Again, one size does not fit all. California, I've said it many times, has many parts, one body, one state, one responsibility, larger responsibility to each other, but each part of the state has different conditions, including El Dorado County, where we are today. Many counties fall into that category. I mentioned yesterday that 2 counties, on the first day we put out guidelines, were able to move forward with self-attestation around their containment and plans to secure the health of people within their communities. It allows them to move forward with dine-in options and move forward with more personal services in their communities. Today, we now have 10 counties that have fallen into that category. And I just want to say this, it's a personal statement, but it deserves to be shared publicly. The spirit of collaboration and cooperation with Butte County and El Dorado, with Yuba and Sutter, which got a lot of attention a few weeks ago, over the last number of days has been wonderful. And I just want to thank those county leaders. I want to thank the county health directors for a job well done, working with our team, getting that technical assistance, going back and forth with clarifications, updating their plans in a way that do justice to this moment, led through a public health lens, led through a data lens. We're putting those self-attestations up so the public can see them, and we are also putting maps up so you can test where those counties are in real time. And when I mean by test, I mean quite literally, not just figuratively, the number of tests that are positive in those counties, the number of individuals that tragically may have lost their lives. You'll be able to look at that from a county-by-county basis, and I encourage you to go to covid19.ca.gov to access that information. Again, county by county, covid19.ca.gov, and you'll be able to see where your county is in terms of the county-county differential into the phase 2. 10 counties up as I speak. Many more that we hope to get up in real time. I won't be making all these announcements every day. Our health officials will be. I'll try to update you on a rolling basis, but as I said, this is a dynamic process, and we don't want to delay unnecessarily based on timelines. It's not about timelines. It's not about deadlines. It's simply about data, and it's about health. And once those indicators and once those plans are in place and those indicators turn green, we will continue to make announcements. I think we're up to 31 consultations, different counties that we've been engaged with. Most have gone very well. Some are, not where they need to be, and we're going to try to do our best to accommodate, work through some issues. I've yesterday and the day before mentioned some of those counties, Kern and among many others, where we're just trying to work through some issues, and just know we're doing our best in real time to accommodate. But there's certain foundational health issues that must be met first before we can move forward. But again, we're not ideological in terms of that engagement. Just final point, because we mentioned yesterday some new testing capacity, new increase in testing that we'll be doing, new sites at pharmacies in the state of California, a new partnership, a renewed partnership that we expanded with OptumServe for new sites in rural parts of California, soon in Lake County as an example, Mendocino among other counties. I just want to encourage people to go to that same website, covid19.ca.gov, and you can, instead of going by the county-to-county guidelines section, go to the testing section on COVID-19 and then put in your zip code and see what testing sites come up, what pop up in your community and nearby. And if you feel you need to get a test, if you have symptoms or you're concerned about a loved one or a family member, go to that site. I would encourage first because that site will provide 251 community points of access. We'll eventually have 86 OptumServe sites, 6+ Verily sites on there, and those sites will be afforded to you free. You don't have to come out of pocket in terms of the costs of those tests. There are other pop-up facilities everywhere, but in some cases they ask for cash up front, or they may just bill your insurance company. You may have a copay component. I just encouraging people to take advantage of trying to get these tests for free, because I know the economic anxiety is real for folks, and that's an impediment for many people, and we don't want that to be an impediment. We want people to know that they should access those sites so that they can know their own conditions and know that they are in, well, whatever condition the test results prove, that they know that they can also begin the process of accessing support, treatment, and the like. So that's the update for the day. Now we're happy to take any questions.
Governor, I the LA Times. I've been nominated to ask questions on behalf of other members of the press today. My first question will be for me. I'm just curious, you talked about the priority of funding fire response and coronavirus response. There's got to be a balance, as you know, with the budget, literally, and I'm just kind of curious what's kind of going to give. I mean, are we going to see cuts in some of our safety net programs? Are we going to see any tax increases? What should Californians expect in the months ahead?
The good news is within 24 hours, you'll get very detailed answer to those questions. We're putting out the May revise at noon tomorrow. I'll be laying out our strategy, our options. Our values will not change. The numbers have radically changed. We projected a close to $6 billion budget surplus 90 days ago, tens of billions of dollars now, projected deficit, increased costs and burdens. The announcement I'm making today, I do so soberly. We did pull back in certain areas in the budget to OES and CAL FIRE, but we're still able to move forward because of the essential nature of these functions in terms of public safety. But we couldn't do everything that we proposed in January. You'll see that as a general theme tomorrow, and there are sobering and deep challenges that we have to address head on, and I cannot underscore this enough. There was a reason with the Western state governors that 2 days ago we sent a letter signed not only by 6 governors from 6 different states, but by 6 legislative leaders in both houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives, or in the assemblies of those respective states. I don't know that there's a lot of precedent for a letter signed by so many individuals requesting support from the federal government. This is not just about the state of California. These deficits are so profound and so pronounced for one thing, COVID-19. The federal government must do more to help support these states. We need the federal government, and we can avoid a lot of these cuts to police and fire, our frontline first responders, particularly at the county levels, at the city levels, with the federal government support. And that's why I'm very pleased and proud of Speaker Pelosi's work. She put out what she calls the HEROES Act. Couldn't be better named, because it is quite literally about protecting our heroes, care for our caregivers, and it's about protecting our first-line responders and first responders of all stripes against budget cuts, and we're going to need her to be successful with her Senate colleagues.
Pascal Fußholder of Ubinet News asked what sort of state assistance will be available to northern and central Sierra Nevada foothill areas that are expecting to see a really kind of severe wildfire season this year, and specifically about evacuation centers for people who may be elderly, who may need a kind of a clean area to where there's no smoke to inhale. Yeah. Also people who may test positive for coronavirus or be suspected of having it. Are there going to be special facilities for them?
By the way, that's a wonderful question and a profoundly important question, because it connects the obvious. You're dealing with COVID-19 in a crisis that impacts every sector of our society, every aspect of our society, including our ability to recruit, retain, and keep healthy our workforce. Just the training academy classes for CAL FIRES, we have to make those considerations. But now, in compounding these challenges, you have emergency evacuation centers, you have temporary shelters that come up traditionally in wildfire season around evacuations, and we need to have the capacity to quarantine and to isolate individuals that may be tested positive for COVID-19. We, of course, have a state-of-the-art mutual aid system that's very culturally competent, that's sensitive to the needs of our diverse communities, seniors among others. But rather than me waxing on about that, why don't I ask Director Mark Ghilarducci, who's an expert in this space, to opine a little bit more and answer more granularly the very, very thoughtful question.
Thanks, Governor, and thanks for the question. We have really actually been doing a lot of thought about this, and we've been working with our colleagues in the Red Cross and our sheriffs across the state who are involved with evacuations, our local emergency management community, thinking about evacuating in the advent of a COVID situation, and it would look different. We're looking at evacuation centers being segregated, maybe COVID maybe versus non-COVID. We're looking at possibly using hotel solutions where we have the opportunity to put evacuees in hotels, single rooms, versus congregating in a large sort of like a dormitory or a school gymnasium, which we typically use. We're looking at, in the event that we do gymnasiums, putting in partitions and segregating appropriately, putting air cleaners and air purifiers in place, being able to work very closely with the incident management teams and CAL FIRE or our local governments to ensure that if we're going to do an evacuation, we maybe evacuate sooner to give more time for people to move into areas of more secure refuge. So, and evacuations areas could be a little further out, or there may be more of them to be able to address the need to have the social distancing that's required in these cases. Look, this is not a perfect solution. We're obviously going to be working through these in real time, and we're going to be assessing each individual case as they're presented to us. But we really thought through a lot about what does evacuation now look like in the advent of COVID, and we do have a number of protocols that we're working with to be prepared for this year.
Yeah, I want to take this opportunity just to add a piece that Governor Newsom touched on in his opening remarks. That is Techno Silva. So we have entered into a contract with a company that will allow us to future fires, meaning grow them ahead of when they actually are on the landscape. And the Fire Guard, which is our early detection from remote sensing capabilities with the California National Guard. Those two things are going to help us do what Director Ghilarducci just mentioned early. And so we're going to have more time to make those decisions ahead of time and get people where they need to be safe.
There were additional wildfire questions by Julie Card of Cal Matters and Dale Kasler of the Sacramento Bee, kind of on some of the details of what's happening. Number one, I mean, usually now this is a season for mitigation, and I know, Governor, you mentioned some of the actions that were being taken already, but overall, has brush clearance, have controlled burns, has that overall been reduced? And the other question is about prison fire crews. Since there's been a lot of early release to get people out of the prisons, the numbers are diminished as far as number of prisoners who can be put on fire crews to help fight these fires. Just kind of curious how big of an impact that may have.
I'll take the last question, and we can talk again. I talked about the 450,000 acres that we will complete in terms of vegetation management this year. Chief Porter can reflect that in terms of numbers. I think someone was very pleased to hear that with numbers comparing and contrasting to previous years. As it relates to that, why don't I just, with the noise, ask Chief Porter to come up and talk about mitigation.
So fuel reduction was covered earlier, and we this year are halfway to our goal of 45,000 to 50,000 acres just by CAL FIRE. the 450,000 acres of all lands being treated across California on state and private lands, we're working toward that as well. Those are calendar numbers, so we've got a ways to go. We have a lot of work that we're doing currently. This little bit of rain we've had in the north part of the state is helping us. It's opening up some burn windows, so there will be prescribed fire on the ground. We have worked with our Forest Service counterparts to adjust their decision not to do prescribed burning this spring. They made that decision, as it turns out, during a good time for us. It was wet. They couldn't burn anyway. So now they're coming back into the game. We're going to see that fuel reduction work continuing. We have a very extensive plan that's been laid out over the last several years to continue to do work on the ground that is with machinery and crews, not all prescribed burning, but the fuel reduction project work, and couple that with the defensible space inspection program that we have, making sure that people are getting their defensible space, making sure that Californians are helping their neighbors get that defensible space done, and then structure hardening. That's what's going to truly protect the communities that we have to protect. We are also going to continue to add, as the governor mentioned, the firefighting resources, firefighters to CAL FIRE, to every fire station throughout the state in order to increase our capability to have initial attack success.
And, let me take the first part of, I guess it was two questions, and let me take the other question as it relates to the fire camps. So we are currently down about 44 crews with our prison fire crews and our camps. We project, this is a projection about being down about by 80 crews. This has been a trend line, though, that precedes the early release. Remember, the early release for people that were 60 days out from being released anyway. We're almost 60 days into that process. This predates the early release. We've seen a decline since AB 109, since Prop 47, since Prop 57. So you've seen this diminish number, and as a consequence, it requires us to do a little bit more, and it's, I think, a part of what we're providing in terms of a consideration to the legislature tomorrow, and that is the need to increase our firefighting personnel, and that's why it's important, this enhancement, to get more folks onto these engines, including a fourth personnel on some engines, and increasing the total rank of staff that we have up and down the state.
I have a question from Kathleen Ronayne of the Associated Press, asking, now that a handful of counties have been allowed to open up, are you worried that people leaving still closed counties to dine or otherwise recreate in the reopened counties? And what's your message to Californians about traveling around the state between places that are more restrictive to places that are less restrictive? Yeah,
we've made that clear from day one when we introduced the guidelines that we maintain maintain as an advisory that people not travel for non-essential purposes, and going in and out of the counties would defeat the point of having county variations. There are, however, large parts of this state where a lot of the counties are moving together, and you'll have multiple jurisdictions. These are regions, not just counties, that are larger than many states, where all of those counties are in unison in terms of their advisory. So it's less significant in that respect. But no, this is the big challenge. You open up a dense urban environment right next door to a community that's not opened, people start rushing into that dense urban environment and coming back into their community. And that's why we want a regional focus, a county focus, bringing in other cities, and that's beginning the process of regionalizing. To the extent we can broaden county by county in either larger regions, we encourage that. So common sense dictates, and those advisories have been consistent, and they're part of the guidelines we put up.
All right, I got several questions about Elon Musk. What kind of signal does it send to small businesses that Tesla is operating the Fremont plant in flagrant violation of Alameda County's health order, while most businesses are following the rules. What, if anything, is the state, or should the state do to crack down on that?
I'll remind people, in the state of California, we are allowing manufacturing, logistics, and warehouse work to resume. Our guidelines were lifted weeks ago. Alameda County has different rules and different regulations. The county adopts those rules and regulations from an enforcement prism. As you know, as many people know, they have made public announcements that they have worked with Tesla, and they have put together a process where they will reopen. Both the county made that public and Tesla concurred, so progress is being made in that space. Anytime there's friction, we hope to make progress. This is a broader point. This is a county issue. The state allows for manufacturing. As it relates to county jurisdictions and enforcement, I would encourage them to do what we do as a state. When the state does enforce, we try to work with people. It's not ready, fire, aim. It's ready, aim, fire, trying to figure out what the issue is, trying to work things out. If people refuse to work things out, then you have to ratchet up those conversations and those efforts. But we seek not to be punitive at first, and it sounds like, based upon the progress that's been made public with the county and Tesla, that they were able to resolve their issue in fairly short order along those same lines.
Okay, got a question from John Ferrarini of the Bay Area Reporter. He said that earlier today in a conference call with reporters, LGBT advocates blasted you and the state health department for failing to collect data on how COVID-19 is impacting the state's LGBT residents. Will you be issuing an executive order to require health officials to ask people about their sexual orientation and gender identity when they are tested for the coronavirus?
Yeah, God bless. I've been very clear that this information, we want this information to be forthcoming. We care deeply about providing and receiving that information, or having the benefit of that information being provided at the county level. We're working with Scott Wiener, who's been outstanding leader in this space. He has legislative effort to do just that, and we have been in constant contact, including not only with him, but the LGBT caucus on this issue. And so we look forward to working with him and resolving. And the community is absolutely right. That information has not been forthcoming. But let me just make this crystal clear. For decades, we have been underreporting in the LGBT community space as it relates to issues that are important to the community. That must change. That predates this pandemic. And working with the caucus, working with Senator Wiener, we hope to have a legislative effort very shortly, my desk, that will allow us to move forward by going together. But I'm very deferential to the work that Senator Wiener is currently doing, and I know that no one wants to see this information more, not only than I, but Dr. Sonia Angel, whose entire cause of life before she became health director in this state was protecting our diverse communities and making sure there was more reporting and transparency. And she's been very clear on multiple occasions, very publicly, that she is requesting this information, and the legislative efforts will help us demand that information with much more scrutiny and much more capacity and transparency. Well, with that, I want to just thank everybody for their time and attention. Thank the team that assembled here. No cleaner location than being in a fire station anywhere in this country, and no greater fire service than CAL FIRE, one of the largest and most dynamic and most successful, as well as ubiquitous forces of leaders anywhere in our nation and in the world, and we couldn't be more proud to call them our own. They'll be, I hope, seeing larger ranks. They'll be seeing even more support this year if the legislature concurs with our thinking. I'm confident they will, and I'm confident when they do that this year's fire season, which will be ferocious and challenging on the natural, that we can do justice and do what we can, what's humanly possible to mitigate its damage and mitigate its spread. And speaking of mitigating damage and spread, I want to just encourage people to continue the good work that you've done to date. The reason we're able to announce 10 counties moving deeper into Phase 2 is because of your outstanding work. The reason I was able to announce yesterday even increased loosening of the stay-at-home order statewide is because of your good work. This is a dynamic process. We hope in the next days, weeks, not just months, we'll continue to see more progress, but that's up to each and every one of us. In the spirit of what Chief Porter said about the issues of fire preparedness, I make this point. Let us also do our best to stop the spread, in this case, of COVID-19. Do what you can to do the social distancing that we must, practice the physical distancing, wear face coverings in public when you come into close contact with others. Continue to do your best to stay healthy, stay safe, and stay connected to your loved ones. Take care, everybody, and thanks so much for being with us.